Chapter 12, Viking Law and Justice. The Thıng Assembly. You've returned to Norway after your Greenland ordeal, and you've been home for only 2 weeks when you're summoned to attend a regional Thing. Not the massive annual gathering you attended before, but a smaller assembly to handle urgent legal matters that can't wait. The issue at hand is complex, a land dispute between 2 families that's escalated to violence. Men have died, property has been destroyed, and now both families are calling for justice. This is your chance to understand how Viking law actually works, beyond the brutal punishments you've witnessed. Because despite their reputation for violence, Vikings have a sophisticated legal system, one based on precedent, community consensus, and complex negotiations. The Thing is held in a natural amphitheatre, a depression in the landscape where hundreds of people can gather. Only free men are allowed to participate in legal proceedings, but everyone attends to witness. Women, children, and thralls watch from the edges, unable to vote but certainly interested in the outcomes. The law speaker, an old man named Thorolf, stands on a raised rock in the centre. He's been elected to this position because he's memorized the laws, all of them, passed down orally through generations. There are no written legal codes. The law exists in Thorolf's mind and the minds of other law speakers across the Norse world. Before the specific case is heard, Thorolf recites the relevant laws. This isn't the entire legal code, just the parts pertaining to property disputes and violence arising from such disputes. Even this section takes nearly an hour to recite. The laws are complex, covering every imaginable scenario. What happens if a boundary stone is moved? What if cattle stray onto a neighbour's land? What if a river changes course, altering property lines? What compensation is owed if someone damages another's property? What are the consequences of killing someone during a property dispute? For each scenario there are precedents, previous cases and their resolutions that guide current decisions. The law is alive, evolving with each thing, each judgment adding to the body of precedent. The case begins. The first family, led by a man named Orm, presents their grievance. A spring that has traditionally provided water for their farm has been diverted by their neighbours, the family led by Ulf. This diversion, Orm claims, violates ancient boundaries and threatens his family's survival. Orm presents witnesses who testify that the spring has always been on his family's land. He produces property markers, ancient stones that delineate boundaries. He argues that Ulf's actions are not just theft of water, but an insult to his honour, and a violation of sacred boundaries. Then Ulf's family responds. They argue that the spring is actually on their land, that the boundary markers Orm showed are recent fabrications, and that their family has always had rights to this water. They too produce witnesses, people who swear that the spring has always belonged to Ulf's family. They show different boundary markers and claim Orm is the one violating ancient rights. Now it gets complicated. Because this isn't just about water. It's about honour, about family reputation, about who is truthful and who is lying. The violence that erupted from this dispute is also addressed. Orm's son was killed by Ulf's nephew in a fight over the spring. Ulf's barn was burned, possibly by Orm's family, though they deny it. So the Thing must address: who owns the spring? Who started the violence? What compensation is owed? What punishment is appropriate? Witnesses are called. Some testify for Orm, others for Ulf. Some contradict each other directly. The assembly must determine who is telling the truth. This is where the oath system comes in. Both Orm and Ulf must swear oaths that their claims are true, but the weight of an oath isn't equal. Your oath is backed by your reputation and the oaths of others willing to vouch for you. Orm brings forward 12 oath helpers, men willing to swear that his word is good. These aren't witnesses to the specific events, just people attesting to Orm's general honesty and honour. Ulf brings forward only 8 oath helpers. This is significant. It suggests that Ulf has fewer people willing to stake their reputations on his word. The assembly discusses this. The law speaker is consulted. Precedents are considered. What did the Thing decide in similar cases? After hours of debate, a judgment is proposed. The spring belongs to Orm, based on the weight of oaths and the testimony. Ulf's diversion of the water was illegal. However, the burning of Ulf's barn was also illegal, and Orm's family must compensate Ulf for that loss. Regarding the death of Orm's son, the assembly rules that the killing, while tragic, occurred during a mutual fight. Both parties were armed and willing to fight. Therefore it's not murder but a fair combat, and no wergild is owed. However, Ulf must restore the spring to its original course, and pay Orm for the loss of water use. Orm must pay Ulf for the barn, The amounts are specified: 12 ounces of silver from Ulf to Orm, 10 ounces from Orm to Ulf. Net result: Ulf owes Orm 2 ounces of silver, plus the labour of restoring the spring. Both parties are asked if they accept this judgment. This is crucial. Viking law doesn't work unless both parties agree to abide by the Thing's decision. Orm accepts immediately. Ulf hesitates, clearly unhappy with the judgment, but eventually nods his agreement. To reject the Thing's judgment would be to reject the law itself, making him an outlaw. The assembly witnesses the agreement. Hands are shaken. The dispute is officially settled. Except it isn't. Not really, because Ulf's hesitation, his clear unhappiness, suggests this isn't over. The legal dispute may be resolved, but the underlying feud will likely continue. This is the weakness of Viking law. It can compel obedience through social pressure and the threat of outlawry, but it can't force people to actually accept outcomes they disagree with. Sure enough, 6 months later, another incident occurs. Ormam's cattle are found dead, poisoned. There's no proof Ulf's family did it, but everyone suspects. Orm wants to bring another case to the Thing, but his neighbours advise against it. "You won already," one tells him. "If you keep dragging this dispute to the Thing, people will see you as troublesome. Let it go." But Orm can't let it go. His honour demands response. So instead of going through legal channels, he takes matters into his own hands. One night, Ulf's son is ambushed and killed. Orm doesn't admit to ordering it, but everyone knows. The feud has escalated beyond law. Now Ulf's family wants revenge. They appeal to the Thing again, but the evidence is circumstantial. Orm denies involvement. Without clear proof or witnesses, the Thing can't act. The feud continues, generation after generation, each killing answered with another, each injustice feeding the cycle of revenge. This is the reality of Viking justice. The law exists and functions, but it sits atop a foundation of blood feud and honor culture that often overwhelms legal resolution. You witness other cases at various Things over the following years, and you begin to understand the complexity of the system. There are different types of Things. The local Thing meets several times a year to handle routine matters. The regional Thing meets annually to handle more serious cases. And the Thing, the National Assembly in places like Iceland, is the highest legal authority. Cases can be appealed from lower Things to higher ones if the parties aren't satisfied. This creates a hierarchy of justice, though in practice, most disputes are settled at the local level. You see cases involving theft, a man accused of stealing his neighbour's axe. The accuser provides witnesses who saw the accused with an axe matching the description. The accused claims he made the axe himself. The Thing examines the axe, looking for maker's marks or distinctive features. They interview craftsmen about axe-making techniques. Eventually, based on the weight of evidence, the accused is found guilty and must return the axe plus pay a fine equivalent to the axe's value. He's also publicly shamed, his reputation damaged. Insult. A man claims another insulted his wife, calling her a thrall. This is a serious accusation because it questions the woman's free status and thus the legitimacy of her children. The accused admits to saying it but claims it was said in jest, not seriously. The Thing debates, is intent relevant or does the harm caused by the words matter more? Eventually they rule that the insult, even in jest, causes real harm to reputation. The insulter must pay compensation and publicly retract his words. Inheritance. A man dies leaving 3 sons and 2 daughters. The estate must be divided according to law. Sons inherit more than daughters, but daughters have rights to dowries. There's also a widow with rights to part of the estate. The Thing oversees the division, ensuring each party gets their legal due. When one son objects, claiming his father verbally promised him the entire estate, the Thing requires witnesses to that promise. None can be produced, so the objection is denied. Contract dispute. 2 merchants made an agreement, but there was no written contract. Most Vikings can't read or write. They disagree about the terms. Each brings witnesses who heard the agreement, but the witnesses contradict each other. The Thing must determine who is more credible. They examine the merchants' reputations, the logic of the claimed terms, and the consistency of the testimony. Eventually they make a judgment that splits the difference, neither merchant getting exactly what they claimed but both getting something. Divorce. A woman wants to divorce her husband, claiming he beats her excessively and has failed to provide for her. Viking women can initiate divorce, which is relatively progressive, but they must prove grounds. She shows bruises and scars, but the husband claims she's clumsy and accident-prone. Neighbors testify that they've heard her screaming and seen her injuries. The husband's reputation for violence is discussed. The Thing grants the divorce, the woman retains her dowry, and the husband must pay her additional compensation for the abuse. She returns to her family, now free to remarry if she chooses. What strikes you most about Viking law is how it attempts to be fair within its cultural context, even though that context includes values wildly different from modern ones. For example, Viking law absolutely recognizes slavery as legal and provides rules for the treatment and sale of thralls. From a modern perspective, this is monstrous. But within the Viking worldview, it's the law attempting to regulate an accepted institution. Similarly, blood feuds are recognized as legitimate. The law tries to channel them into acceptable forms, compensation payments, formal duels, but it doesn't deny the right to revenge. Honor culture is baked into the legal system. Women have more rights under Viking law than in many contemporary societies. They can own property, initiate divorce, inherit wealth, and even speak at the Thing, though they can't vote. But they're still fundamentally second class. Their legal value literally calculated as less than men's in Wergild payments. The law protects free people, but offers almost no protection to thralls. A thrall who is murdered might warrant compensation to their owner for loss of property, but the thrall themselves has no legal standing. This is sophisticated law, but it's law built on assumptions about hierarchy, honor, and violence that modern people would find abhorrent. You also observe the enforcement mechanisms. Because Viking society has no police force, no army tasked with enforcing the law. Instead, enforcement relies on social pressure. Being known as someone who violates the Thing's judgments destroys your reputation. People won't trade with you, won't marry into your family, won't support you in disputes. This social ostracism is powerful in small, tight-knit communities. Self-help. If someone owes you money and refuses to pay, you have the right to seize their property equivalent to the debt, as long as you've exhausted legal channels first. You and your family members might literally go to the debtor's farm and take livestock or goods equal to what's owed. This is legal, as long as it's done publicly and you don't take more than you're owed. Outlawry. The ultimate punishment for serious crimes or refusal to accept the Thing's judgment. The outlawry loses all legal protection. Anyone can kill them without consequence. Their property is forfeited. They must flee or die. This is serious enough that most people comply with judgments rather than risk outlawry. Feud. If legal channels fail, blood feud is the backup. This is messy and destructive, but it's acknowledged as a legitimate response to injustice within the honor culture. The system works, more or less, because the community is invested in making it work. Everyone participates in the Thing. Everyone witnesses the judgments. Everyone has a stake in maintaining the legal order, because the alternative is chaos. But it's also fragile. It requires broad consensus. And when that breaks down, when feuds spiral out of control, or when outlaws band together, the system struggles. You witness this fragility when a regional Thing tries to settle a massive dispute involving multiple families, dozens of people, and accusations ranging from theft to murder. The case drags on for 3 days. Tempers fray. Armed men glare at each other across the assembly ground. At one point, it seems like the Thing itself might devolve into battle. Hands go to weapon hilts. People back away, preparing to choose sides if fighting breaks out. The law speaker and the most respected men present intervene, stepping between the factions, calling for calm. Through careful negotiation and compromise, they barely manage to reach a settlement that avoids immediate violence. But everyone leaves unhappy. The settlement satisfies no one completely, which might mean it's fair, but it also means the underlying tensions remain. This is Viking law operating at its limits. When disputes are too large, too emotional, too tied up in honor and revenge, the law struggles to contain them, and sometimes it fails entirely. Sometimes the Thing's judgment is ignored. Sometimes feuds spiral despite legal interventions. Sometimes outlaws actually succeed in escaping justice and establishing outlaw communities that the law can't reach. The Vikings understood this. Their law was never intended to be perfect or to prevent all violence. It was meant to channel violence into manageable forms, to provide alternatives to immediate revenge, to give communities tools to resolve disputes without everyone killing each other. Does it succeed? Partially. The Viking Age is still incredibly violent by modern standards, but probably less violent than it would be without any legal system at all. As you participate in multiple things over the years, attending as a free man with the right to vote on judgments, you develop grudging respect for the system. It's flawed, based on values you find troubling, and often ineffective at preventing violence. But it's also sophisticated, nuanced, and genuinely attempts to be fair within its cultural framework. The law speaker's recitation of precedents shows a deep legal tradition. The careful weighing of oaths and testimony shows a proto-legal process. The community participation shows an early form of democracy. Viking law is what you get when a violent honor culture tries to regulate itself. When communities on the edge of survival need to maintain order without kings or police. When the only real authority is collective agreement and the threat of outlawry. It's not pretty, but it's not chaos either. It's law suited to its time and place. Pragmatic, communal, and always enforced with the implicit threat of violence. Because at the end of the day, Viking law works not because people believe in abstract justice, but because they know what happens to those who reject the Thing's authority. They become outlaws. And outlaws don't last long.